Today, South Australians are living the reality of yesterday's shock announcement with extreme measures to quickly get on top of a coronavirus outbreak that stands at 23 cases for now. So it's not a huge outbreak as it stands, but the concern was it was potentially going to quickly get out of control. There'll be an update on those numbers in a few hours. Reporter Matthew Smith joins us now from Adelaide. Matt, g'day. So first day of lockdown, is it super quiet on the streets there?
Pretty quiet here in the heart of the city, Joe, that's for sure. Everyone essentially being told to stay at home. You can't even go out and exercise. Schools this time have closed. That didn't happen last time. The same with the construction industry. Pubs and clubs, they're all closed down. Essentially, this is the circuit breaker the state government and health authorities want. Obviously, essential services are staying open, but the Premier this morning spoke out very strongly, explaining why this 6 days of lockdown is going ahead.
We're going hard, we're going early, we want to get out of it as quickly as we possibly can. But this is a pause in mobility to allow all of our contact tracing to be done and to move people into quarantine. We've got one shot. You don't get a second chance to stop a second wave. And so we're throwing absolutely everything at this because we want South Australia to have a Christmas. We've got great cooperation from the people of South Australia in terms of testing, but also in terms of going into quarantine when we ask them to.
And Matthew, are most people there accepting that this is the right way to go, or are some saying it's over the top?
No, I think most people are accepting this as a very prudent move. There was shock when it was first announced early afternoon yesterday. Then it turned to panic and unfortunately supermarket shelves were emptied. Bottle shops were also emptied, which was pretty strange. But by and large, people accepting that if we go hard and go early, we might get on top of this very quickly.
And so how long is it going to last?
6 days at this stage. We'll see what the numbers are doing. You said it's not very high, around 23 cases at this stage. Only 2 yesterday and a further 7 suspected cases. But there was the concern that this would spread very quickly, especially as one of them came from a pizza bar in Adelaide's western suburbs. So it's all about the numbers. We need to get high numbers through getting tested and hopefully not a lot of positive cases, and then restrictions may be eased midway through next week, but we'll just have to wait and see how it pans out.
And Matthew, we're just seeing some shots of this Woodville pizza bar. Tell us what the concern is about that.
Well, you have a lot of apps where pizzas are ordered through. You have delivery drivers taking these out to people. So they're working through credit card details, trying to work out who has ordered and taken pizzas in this period of concern, just to see that it hasn't spread to a widening cluster of people. I think we talked about a 5th generation of spread from the initial outbreak. So it's a difficult situation, one they need to get on top of quickly before it gets right amongst the community.
And that's over quite a period of time, isn't it, in relation to that pizza, about like 10 days or something?
That's right, yeah. They're just covering that whole period to make sure that there's not one case that slips through the net, because then that spreads right throughout the western suburbs and right throughout Adelaide. So they need to get on top of that quickly, contact all those people. They're all at home now, hopefully, and that can be done very quickly.
And the Chief Health Officer said yesterday they believe that the transmission happened to the pizza bar through a security guard who was working both at one of the quarantine hotels and the pizza bar. Has there been much discussion there in South Australia about the fact that has been happening through this quarantine hotel process?
Yeah, the question was asked, how can someone who's working at a Medi hotel where people are in quarantine work a second position at a pizza bar? It hasn't got to the stage where they've said workers can only work in a Medi hotel, but there is speculation about whether the rules will need to be changed, as they've now changed and made tests mandatory for all of those in a Medi hotel on a weekly basis. So that rapidly changing situation, which this virus has been all year long, will continue to be the case, and maybe we'll only see workers specifically staying in Medi hotels.
Yeah. And Matt, what's the situation with masks there in South Australia at the moment, and is there any talk that could be changed?
At the moment, it's only strongly recommending people wear masks when they're outside, but there is talk this morning, and the Premier has said it may be a case where we move to mandatory masks, which has been happening in Melbourne for so long, and they're only about to start easing those restrictions. But here there is a chance they may become mandatory, but that's not the case right now.
Yeah. Okay, Matthew Smith reporting there from the quiet streets of Adelaide. And we're hearing that update on the numbers in Adelaide or South Australia will happen at 11 this morning, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, so it's 10:30 Australian Central Daylight Time. So unfortunately at that time, we've got this other big story today with the release of the defence report, or the report into war crime allegations against Australian soldiers in Afghanistan. The Chief of Defence is stepping up, we understand, at 11 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So there could be a clash with that, but we'll keep you across both those stories as the details come through this morning. Now, Victorian officials are working to prevent the outbreak from spreading across the border. It comes as the state records its 20th consecutive day of zero coronavirus cases. Reporter Iskander Razak joins us now from Melbourne. G'day. So what restrictions are being placed in Victoria and along the border with South Australia?
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, today we're going to see authorities really setting up these testing sites along the border on highways and freeways, areas between South Australia and Victoria where people are obviously constantly driving. The links between South Australia and Victoria are quite tight-knit. There are a lot of regional communities that share facilities despite being on two separate states. So those towns like Neil that are really reliant on South Australia, there'll be these rapid testing sites, and the aim is to really test truck drivers. Victorians know that truck drivers are essential to the goods and services, but they can also be carriers. We suffered that here in Victoria in Kilmore, where a truck driver in Melbourne spread the virus to Kilmore in a regional community, and it required that community to really take some big steps to stop that cluster from turning into a major outbreak. So truck drivers are the major area that Victorian authorities are looking at to try and get some testing on. They're also testing the wastewater in Western Victoria just to see if the virus is somehow getting into the community, and hospitals there have been warned to be prepared for some sort of change. There's also been a change when it comes to hotel quarantine. We found out yesterday that people in hotel quarantine in Adelaide, return travellers, if they were Victorians coming to Victoria after their quarantine had ended, they would have to go through another round of hotel quarantine, so 2 rounds of hotel quarantine. We've been told overnight that's not going to be the case. If they've completed hotel quarantine in Adelaide and they come to Victoria, they'll go into home isolation, which is 14 days, but a little bit easier. So this is still a fluid area. Victorian authorities are finessing the restrictions, and they're really watching to see what happens in Adelaide, and will change things as they develop.
So is there any talk of the border between Victoria and South Australia being shut?
Well, it is a discussion being looked at behind the scenes. Victoria's borders throughout this entire pandemic, throughout Victoria's second wave, have never been closed to any state or territory, and that remains the case. So the border between South Australia and Victoria remains open. But as I said, the authorities are looking at that and considering what models could be used. A lot of politicians will be speaking later today. And again, authorities will be watching what happens in Adelaide to see how this cluster develops. It is, again, important to note, these towns, these regional communities, they've had some sort of bubbles between South Australia and Victoria because of essential goods, hospital needs. Something like that could be allowed. Right now, though, the border remains open, but it is flexible, it is dynamic.
And were Victorians jealously watching that State of Origin game last night with that capacity crowd at Lang Park, thinking when might that happen at the MCG again?
I'm sure, listen, sport fans around the world want something similar. Victorians, of course, looking at what's happening and wanting those big crowds as well. There is talk of what could be possible for the Boxing Day test when it comes to cricket. We know that Tennis Australia has some plans to try and get the tennis season underway. We're hoping that numbers stay low across the nation, that this outbreak in Adelaide can be contained and it doesn't spread to Victoria, so that, yes, sport in Victoria can return, and of course borders across the nation opened so that everyone can enjoy their Christmas. But we'll have to just wait and see. I mean, this is still a very dynamic situation. Victorians know exactly how quickly this can get out of control, so there's a lot of love and support going across the border. Victoria and South Australia, have a bit of a rivalry that I'm very well aware of, being a South Australian living in Victoria. But right now, we are supporting them as much as we can.
Good stuff. Okay, Iskandar Razak reporting there from Melbourne.